Great stuff. All right, let's get into thing number 3 of this week's 5 things. Again, this is the Taylor Swift is responsible for inflation issue. Putting more on her plate. Seems like she can handle it just fine. But Gary, thing number 3, the CBO blowout projections.
Yeah, so the Congressional Budget Office revised their deficit projections. All right, Rob, little economics quiz for you here, government data. A government agency has revised its deficit and debt projections. Do you think they went up or down?
Their projections, well, where I'm assuming they should go up,
Yeah.
right? But knowing the government, did they revise down to only then go back and revise that to up? I'm not quite sure where we might be at.
Yeah, this whole thing is insane. So the CBO, again, that's the Congressional Budget Office. They had thought that the deficit this year, this fiscal year for the government would be about $1.5 trillion. They revised that to $1.9 trillion. That's about a 30% change. And we're, roughly halfway through the year. So, I mean, this is completely crazy. You can't believe any of these numbers. Um, as a reminder, Congress has elected to fund excessive spending through inflation. Right? We used to do these things through taxation, which would cause people to have real conversations because they'd have to sit at their dining room table and write out a check for what they owed the government. And that caused real conversations about the proper size and scope of government, whether programs were worthwhile, and people would vote based on that. And, now we're in a situation where Congress has just said, we don't need to do any of that. We don't need to have hard conversations. We're going to fund everything at every level all the time. If anyone disagrees with us, we're going to call them cold hearted. And they're funding the entire government through inflation. We're all paying higher prices instead of paying taxes. But to give you a sense, like just looking out to 2030, which isn't that far away, half a decade away, slightly more, just in the 2022 projection was just over $35 trillion in debt held by the public, which is different from the on balance sheet debt. And now that's gone to over $40 trillion. These are big changes, right? I mean, I remember when the government debt crossed $1 trillion for the first time. Now we've got an error of $5 trillion. Like, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, 0 cents. And Gary, we've talked about just overall confidence, right, at the Fed rate all the way down in terms of these reports, statistics, projections, right, and how they just seem to be over and over consistently off the mark. My question to that is, what would need to change, right? It almost just sounds like the system itself is broken, which I think a lot of people would agree on. From your take, I mean, what should change? What data and information should we be using? Will they ever revise to a place where, okay, they do have a grasp and an understanding? Powell even came back, I think it was last week or or previous week, saying that they lack confidence in these numbers. And here we are, right? These markets are moving off of these numbers, yet it seems to just all be quite the facade.
Well, first of all, let's give Chairman Powell, who's Chairman Jerome Powell, is the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Let's give him credit. I agree with him. I don't have confidence in the Fed's projections either. So let's give him credit for telling the truth in public. And something, I know it sounds funny, but there are very few government officials who tell the truth in public in a way that is not positive for them or for their agency. Let's at least give them credit for being open about it, for being honest about it. I think, Rob, we have two issues. And I mean, I know what would fix it, but I don't expect either of these things to be done. So let's just take a look. The employment numbers are ridiculous. They get revised, so we'll have a month when the employment numbers will beat expectations by, 100,000 jobs. But if you look at the historical revisions, they revise those down by 125,000 jobs. So none of these numbers are real. Earlier this year, the Philadelphia Fed lost 800,000 jobs. The numbers are off by almost 1 million jobs. These are huge numbers. Again, Powell's saying they don't have confidence in their own projections. The CPI is designed to be inaccurate. None of these things are designed to give us real information that we can use to evaluate the economy. I think there are two problems. The first one is the government is simply too large, right? And like think about it. For all of us, like myself, I'm regularly critical of the government for bad data. But if someone said, "Okay, hey, genius, great, you're now in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, fix it." Like I don't know that I could. How do you?
Yeah.
This is a huge country, 3,000 miles wide, 1,000 miles north to south. Um, Different cultures, different people, 330 million people, the largest economy in the world. And yes, it is still that, the economy isn't in great shape, but we are still the economic powerhouse of the world. Despite, and listen, I get it. I'm on here every week complaining about the inefficiency of the government, the problems in the economy. But it's hard. It's hard when you cover so much ground to get all the data right. I don't know that somebody with good intentions could get it done. The other side of it is there's too much money tied up in having power, and that power gets tied to a media narrative. And, so they can basically feed most of the country, 99% of the country, they can feed fake data, tell everyone everything's fine, everything's great, and use that as a way to continue to grab power and grab money and siphon capital out of the system. And what's being done is horrible and dishonest. I don't know that it's any different from any other government or official corruption in any other country throughout history, right? I mean, this
Uh,
corruption is thousands of years old. This isn't
yeah.
new.
My question follow up on that would be, do you think it's getting worse or has it gotten better, right? In your history and experience, is the gap widening to where we have even more of a lack of control and understanding of what's going on, or is it about the same?
I think it's widening here now. But I want to be clear about something. All empires end the same way. They all end with overexpansion, too much spending, debt, handouts, war, and then more excessive debt. The currency gets debased and the whole thing just collapses. And that's happened throughout history. And Rome is a phenomenal example where they originally had this very detailed system of laws that, while in 2024 we look at some of the flaws in it, and some of the moral failings, but there was a real attempt to have something resembling a virtuous society and laws that would be considered fair and evenly applied. Did they succeed perfectly? No, but they had a pretty amazing society for hundreds of years. But then it collapsed in overexpansion, war, debauchery, debt, the like give them bread and circuses, right? And that's where we are as well. Um and these things happen. And so I think the corruption and the inaccuracy of government data, the lying, the faking, I think it is getting worse here, but I don't know that it's any different than any other time and place. And when you talk to people who do business in other countries, it's the same thing. I know I travel a lot, and I travel all over the world, multiple different continents every year. And you talk to people, and they will tell you you can't get anything done unless you're bribing an official, a politician, somebody in charge. I don't think the US government has any monopoly on corruption. I just think it's just a fact of human existence, right? It's very hard for any society to stay virtuous for long periods of time. But I don't think the US government has any monopoly on corruption. I don't think they're really any worse than anybody else, but that doesn't make it okay. And I'm, certainly not in favor of it.
Sure. We'll keep eyes on obviously reporting, revisions, keep you in tune with everything going on in terms of these reports that are coming out and what to make of them.